Welcome back to the always fun topic of colonization and subjugation. It's time for us to continue with another episode on this subject, looking behind the curtain to see what really happened. We all know that in the 16th century, the colonization of the Americas commenced and then progressed rapidly. Spain got most of Central and South America, for being first. Portugal claimed the coastline that's closest to Africa, today's Brazil, while the other major powers like England, France, and the Netherlands focused their efforts on North America, although they were late to the party. Today, we'll look at the first phase, the initial Spanish attempts to conquer the New World and subjugate its peoples. We'll see how a few hundred European mercenaries managed to destroy two empires and establish a chain of colonies in their place. We tend to view war as a contest between good and evil, but this naive and simplistic explanation does not even begin to describe reality. Most of the time, there are no good guys or bad guys in a conflict. There are just guys who are trying to achieve their goals. What took place on the American continent in the 16th century was nothing new or special. It happens every time when a technologically superior civilization meets a technologically inferior one. We are rarely in a position to exploit newly discovered territories and peoples, so it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which is why many tried to take advantage. Soldiers, mercenaries, bankers, businessmen, and even politicians, in this case, kings and emperors, all try to take a piece of the action. It's not about good or evil, it's about money. And with money comes power and influence. When Columbus discovered the New World, nobody really knew what to do with it. Until his dying day, he remained convinced that he established a new route to India, even though another Italian navigator, Amerigo Vespucci, began advocating his view, that this was in fact an entirely new continent. The Spanish started establishing small colonies on the Bahamas and the islands of Hispaniola and Cuba. This was followed by a new chain of settlements in South America, from today's Venezuela to Panama. The European settlers encountered many different native tribes, some of whom were friendly, while others were hostile. Governing the new territories proved to be very difficult. Mere survival was a challenge. Even the well-known characters of the period, like Columbus himself, found it difficult to remain in good graces with the king and the aristocracy. Many of them had to spend years in prison, or they ended up being executed or murdered by their rivals. It was dog eat dog. Competition was brutal. At that time, there were two significant entities on the continent. One of them was the Aztec Empire in today's Mexico, while the other was the Empire of the Incas, down in Ecuador, Peru, and Chile. The Spanish started hearing stories of untold wealth in the early 1500s. Naturally, this piqued their interest. Adventurers, mostly from the lesser nobility, started organizing expeditions to find out what was behind these stories. As we have mentioned in the previous episode, Spain was full of ex-soldiers who had fought in the Reconquista, so recruiting eager young men was easy. Convincing the king and financial backers, like merchants and bankers, was more difficult. Not to mention that local governors in New Spain also wanted their share, and backstabbing was always present. As it turned out, the Aztec Empire collapsed first due to the arrival of Hernán Cortés and his few hundred Spaniards. Despite their magical weapons like muskets and cannons, and mystical animals like horses, they didn't really stand a chance against the empire, which had tens of thousands of bloodthirsty warriors. Still, they managed to trap their ruler, use him as a puppet, and then flee the capital city of Tenochtitlan, which was subsequently destroyed and then taken over by a reinforced Spanish army. Even with the careful maneuvering, clever tactics, and some luck that Cortés had, this would have been impossible without the assistance they received from a coalition of native tribes and nations who were eager to revenge the atrocities committed by the Aztecs. We shouldn't forget that the Aztec Empire was still very young. Most of its territory was newly conquered, its population brutalized by these fearless eagle warriors. Many of these tribes viewed the Spanish as their liberators, or as a useful tool against their oppressors. This was the key factor that determined the outcome. The Aztecs had no chance against such an alliance. They had to fall, which they did in 1521. Even before Cortés arrived, various diseases of European origin, like smallpox, had ravaged the native population, although we should note that contact with the local peoples was a two-way street, because syphilis was brought back to Europe from the Americas. The impact was of course not the same, but still we should keep in mind that both sides were affected by this process. According to estimates, in Tenochtitlan, smallpox had wiped out roughly 40% of the population in 1520 alone, and over a 100-year period, the population of Mexico plummeted from 25 million to only 1.6 million. In South America, we see a similar decline, with roughly 90% of the population being wiped out in the same period. This also explains the enormous demand for African slaves in the 16th and 17th centuries. Down south, the Inca Empire was still expanding at that time. Stories of enormous treasures reached the coast, partly because nearby tribes wanted to get rid of the newcomers by spreading such fairy tales. Another conquistador, Francisco Pizarro, launched 2 expeditions from Panama without significant results due to bad weather and hostile natives. After a few years, he finally got permission to explore the area we know today as Peru. A 3rd expedition was then organized, and his perseverance would finally pay off. Shortly before the Spanish showed up, the Inca Civil War had just concluded, with Atahualpa defeating his brother Huáscar. The internal situation seemed to be stable once again, but under the surface, unrest in the newly added territories weakened the empire. The Europeans numbered just 168. They had 67 horses, only 3 muskets, and 2 cannons. Atahualpa was confident, with 50,000 loyal soldiers behind him, so he accepted Pizarro's invitation. He was taken hostage, then killed, which crippled the Inca Empire. His successors tried to recover Cusco, the capital, but they failed, although it would take another 4 decades for the Spanish to conquer the last remaining holdouts. Thanks to the Civil War, the Inca aristocracy was already divided. Many of them sided with the Spanish. Their descendants would be educated in Spanish, learning about European culture and religion, which was the only way to preserve their wealth and influence. These families remained part of the ruling elite and formed the future of New Spain and the independent entities that broke away from the mother country in the 19th century. By that time, Spanish influence spanned from Chile all the way to Oregon, although Spain was just a shadow of its former self, for reasons we will discuss in another video. The destruction of the 2 American empires and their subsequent subjugation was a complex and often difficult process. The role of technological superiority was negligible. Disease and local resentments and a civil war were the key factors. Many tribes were opposed to the centralized rule, what they viewed as foreign occupation, meaning the Aztecs and the Incas, not the Spanish, because the Europeans were seen as the lesser threat. This gave rise to the notion that the American territories colonized themselves. All it took for the Spanish was one well-directed punch to the gut, and the existing structures collapsed on themselves. Those who could took advantage, while most succumbed to disease and a new form of oppression. In the next video, we'll take a look at the economic background, how in the end Spain managed to lose all that it had gained with the conquest of the New World.